Hi everyone, it's Raina. So I'm doing a video on the new moon in Scorpio, which is happening on November 4th, and it's going to be at 12 degrees of Scorpio. In my time zone, which is in the United States, the central time zone, it will be at 3:15 p.m. For those of you who use the 24-hour clock, I thought it was really interesting because it said 15:15. So that's pretty interesting. And 12 reduces to a 3. And this could be maybe this will be a very lucrative new moon for you. It depends on what house it's in as to how it will manifest in your life. And even beyond that, we can look at in general terms too, and that's what I want to do here, rather than go through each sign. I wanted to talk about this because Scorpio rules the 8th house. The 8th house, let me just say that Scorpio is the opposite sign of Taurus, and so Taurus rules the 2nd house of earned income. But I like to say money that we attract to us. And sometimes that money can be technically money we don't earn. You know, we attract money through gifts and things like that. And I don't always think that gifts will show up in the 8th house, because the 8th house is other people's money. And so if that money blesses us directly, it might come in the form of gifts. But I think that the 8th house is our relationship to money along with other people's relationship to it as well. So for instance, with an inheritance, we're usually not the only one who is going to benefit from an inheritance. We might have siblings who are getting money, or other family members, other entities, maybe a cat or two. And with a marriage situation, sometimes there are multiple what do they call them? Beneficiaries or something like that. I don't know. I don't know that terminology, but there's just this thing about the 8th house that it can also relate to other types of financial agreements, like loans or any debts that you have and things like that. And the 8th house is also the house of death. And death is a word that we automatically assume means physical death. Not necessarily of us, but maybe people that we care about. But that's not true at all. Death can be the end of an old facet of who we are. So if you look at your natal chart and you have planets in the 8th house, like natal planets there, you will see that and especially I would say if they are personal planets, you will tend to have these like periods of time where you reinvent yourself, and you might not even be doing it consciously. You're just like having all these different seasons of your life where you are a new creature, if you will. So there's that sense when you talk about death also of renewal and transformation. I think that is the better word than death, is transformation. And death is just a form of transformation. Even if you were a stone cold atheist and you do not believe that you're anything other than a bag of bones, you still might begrudgingly admit that you will be transformed from a bag of bones to a pile of dust eventually. And sometimes I do hear people who are like atheists, and they talk about, oh, well, I'm going to fertilize, there are cycles and of nature, and I'm going to fertilize the ground and all this crap. I mean, to me, it's crap because I think that we have a consciousness that survives death. But it's like, I mean, you could say that is true, but I think we're much more than that. But I mean, I guess I'm editorializing, aren't I? But anyway, the thing is that when we're in Scorpio season, we have a new moon or a full moon in Scorpio. These issues can be front and center for our life. And if you are in the northern hemisphere like I am, it becomes even more acutely the case because we are in the autumn period, and that really shows that transformation up front, up close and personal, because we see the leaves, changing colors, falling to the ground, drying up, the trees get very barren and that kind of thing. And so it's in alignment with the Scorpio energy for sure. But even if you're in Australia or New Zealand and you are dealing with spring time, the transformation there is like the phoenix rising from the ashes, especially with this new moon in Scorpio, because it's like resurrection time. And, those of us who are familiar with Eastern and Northern Hemisphere know that it happens to be during the season of spring. So it's like six of one, half dozen of the other, I guess. But when I was looking at this information here about this particular new moon in Scorpio, I was almost like chuckling to myself because it reminded me more of a full moon than a new moon in a lot of ways. It seemed very intense, very combative. And I'm like, well, is that really what we associate with new moon energy? Isn't new moon a new, turning over a new leaf, having this fresh new set of intentions or what have you? But remember that there's these micro cycles, if you will, with these monthly new moons, full moons, or a little bit more significant, you could say the solar and the lunar eclipses. But then on top of that, we have these events that are happening on a global level that are creating major shakeups at the macro level. And some astrologers or great fans of astrologers will say, well, that is because of certain transits that are happening. And I, could see the point in that, but I don't want to make everything about astrology, even though I think that it can show us cycles. I want us to see these things separate to some degree so that we can really, we don't get like caught up in the minutia of it, of trying to apply it to certain transits or not, and just look at it and say what is happening on that level. Well, a lot of, I don't know what to call these people, prophets, energy readers, psychics. I don't know exactly. They all seem like inadequate terms in various ways. But anyway, these seers, if you will, talk about the great awakening, the spiritual upgrade, 3D versus 5D, and the split, bifurcation, all of these different terms. And it's never been, stronger than it is right now. And I'm recording this a couple days after the full moon in Aries. So I think the period of time that sometimes I don't like recording things too far in advance because so much can happen in the space of 2 weeks. So as I record this, it's going to be less, it's going to be like almost 2 weeks until the new moon. And there's a lot of indications that many things will happen between the 22nd, when I'm recording this, and the 4th of November. But who knows? Because we really honestly don't know. We can, the things look good on paper, but, and it certainly is pointing to it in terms of the daily events. Some of you may be kind of totally checked out of social media and the news and all of that, because you just find it too disruptive to your life, and I could totally understand that. I definitely do not watch television, but I am on the internet quite a bit, and so I get my news from alternative sources. But even that can still be disruptive, and sometimes it's tempting just to turn it all off. And I think that people who do so are quite wise. It's just that I'm such a curious person that it's hard to do that at this particular juncture. So let's talk about what is happening here. We have the sun and the moon. This is when a new moon occurs. They're in the exact same degree of the same sign. So we have 12-degree sun, 12-degree moon. Mercury is in Libra. Remember that Mercury began its retrograde in Libra. I believe it was at 25 Libra. I don't have that in front of me. I probably should have reviewed that, because that means it's out of its shadow by now. And let me just double check that. Yeah, 25. So I'm recording this on the 22nd of October. And yeah, I guess Mercury goes to that 25-degree mark the day before. So that's actually significant when that happens, because even when a planet is direct, if it's still in its shadow period, it means that something of the past is still in play, because where it was back at the end of September, it has not gotten to that degree until approximately the 3rd of November. So we start that new moon on the 4th, and it's like we are, starting a new cycle with Mercury. And also, and this is important because the news is very, Mercury represents the news, communication, whatever you want to call it. And that is very crucial at this time, because there's so much change happening and important situations happening that affect people's lives at a deep level. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of people walking off their jobs, people, there are kind of like in different countries, there have been hiccups with the supply chain, and that's for different reasons. But one of the big ones is, the people deciding what they're going to do, whether or not they're going to continue to do this. So what does that tell you? That talks about populism. That talks about the collective and the grassroots level. This is not something that is engineered by some political party, that it's astroturfed or anything like that. Sometimes there are events that occur that are manipulated, by people in positions of power. And Scorpio, for sure, is about power, but it's about the power of the people. And one of the things now, I'm just like, it's all clicking with me, is that I was listening to some other astrologer, I don't remember who it was, and they were talking about the fact that Uranus was opposing this. I assumed it was the new moon, but I really was like a little bit skeptical about that. I wasn't sure. So I checked the ephemeris and I'm like, oh my gosh, Uranus is at the exact same degree as the new moon at 12 degrees. So there you go. You want to talk some grassroots. Uranus rules the 11th house, and that is the house of the collective. That's the humanitarian house, and that is we the people. And I was remarking just today about how the Holocaust didn't happen without the cooperation of regular people. These kinds of things, they cannot possibly happen without the cooperation of everyday people, because there are so many more of us than there are of them. And yet, there are going to be a certain amount of people who comply with the authoritarian individuals, and that they almost are enamored by that. And I think some of it goes back to this issue of needing some kind of a substitute parent. And that's why I mention, that atheists talk about Sky Daddy, and they say, God is this mythical character that people turn to because they get scared and they need comfort. And I agree with that. But that doesn't mean that there's not a God. It's just that the concept is very childish to look at it in that term, because that's part of this awakening, as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the biggest parts of this, is realizing that the people that were looked up to could be the darkest characters of all, and that they're not the heroes that they were made out to be, in all walks of life, in all different areas of life. And again, Pluto in Capricorn is a big part of this, because Pluto is destroying those pillars of society that Capricorn represent, and also the structures of society, all of them: education, political, banking, all of that. And so with Uranus, we have this very rebellious energy, this, what do they call it? Well, it's a nonconformist energy, but there's another word I'm looking for, and I can't think of it, that is kind of like meaning like radical and things like that. And the word radical has turned into like a bad word, because it seems like it's a dangerous person. And what is the opposite of being radical? Conventional? Same old, same old? Are we going to be able to go back to how it was? I remember like one of the energy readers talking about how it'll never go back to how it was. And I remember feeling like a kick in my stomach, and I'm sure some of you heard the same things, and that it affected you as well, because we have, I know I have thought more than once about, gosh, it used to be so much calmer. It used to be this, it used to be that, and just like mourning the loss of that. And I think with this new moon, that's why I say it kind of reminds me of a full moon, because in essence, what Scorpio represents is kind of like what we would see with a full moon, of a culmination of something coming to a head. That's exactly what Scorpio is all about, because it's about what lies beneath. And sometimes what lies beneath is something that is festering for a long time. And so it can be a long time coming. A particular, I don't know what you would call it, a reckoning, a purging, exorcism, all of these things. So I'm kind of doing this a little bit differently. I don't even know if anybody's still listening because I just kind of went on a tangent, but I don't really care because I have to do things in my own way. And so just to review, we have the sun and moon in Scorpio. We have Mercury in Libra, later degree, almost at Scorpio. And the significance of that is, again, it can even be like kind of a gaslighting influence, because with Libra, the speech wants to be very pleasant, but that's not what life is always about. Life isn't always lollipops and unicorns. There are sometimes some very heavy realities. Venus is in Sag, and Mercury and Venus form a sextile. They're in late degrees of each of their signs. Mars is in Scorpio. And so I'm just talking about personal planets. I'm not going to go through all of these. But basically, when I look at the aspects here, one of the things that I was noting in terms of that full moon-esque type of influence is that we have conjunctions from the sun, moon, Mercury to Mars. Oof. And if that wasn't enough for us to deal with, we have a square from Mars to Saturn, which is the father wound. And the father doesn't have to be your literal father. Like I said, these authority figures, this is part of that thing that has been happening where we have been questioning authority. And I'm not just talking about cops, Sometimes I think what happens is that these people that have been controlling humanity for eons, they have the ability to kind of maybe distill what is going on, and they take it and they distort it. And so they know that people are beginning to wake up from that slumber and realize that they are sovereign beings. And so what they do is they try to use this force like the police, in order to symbolize authority, when the police are taking orders from a higher power. And I'm not talking about God either, so as a matter of fact, I've been following the events in Australia, and I just heard from a police officer. She walked off the job because of what they were making her do and her colleagues do. And so these kinds of things are very serious, and it's not just the United States. It is all over the world, and I've seen it. I've seen multiple videos of, police officers really overstepping their boundaries and trying to intimidate the public. But they are by no means the only authority that I am talking about here. This is, this is what awakening means. The whole idea of awakening means you've been asleep and you haven't been really thinking about these things. You've just been going along with the program. With Sun, Moon, Mercury in conjunction to Aries, there's a sense of emotional immediacy. I think I was talking about this at the full moon as well. This sense of like, I feel something, I have to do something. I want to become something. With the sun, I want this power. I want to do this thing. I want to, or a sense of bravery, a sense of guts, doing something that you never thought you would do. But you know, it's tricky because we're talking about Scorpio, and Scorpio is a very fierce sign. And there can be, if the lower energy of Scorpio is activated, a kind of eye for an eye uh, attitude. So, you know, because one of the rulers, I mean, it could, in other words, you have to be careful about doing things on the spur of the moment because there could be a violent situation happening. And of course, somebody would say, you know, that's the nature of revolutions, but we don't want to do that if we can help it. That's for sure. I know I don't want to have anything to do with that. And I don't think it should have to come to that. I think that the first step is to know that you have the right to be free and to know that there's value in being free. But what happens sometimes, it's kind of like when somebody has been subjugated for so long, but they still have kind of a victim mentality. And so when they wake up to the fact that they have been controlled by another person, they go overboard in the opposite direction. And that's not what you want. You don't want reactivity. You want action, not reaction. Reaction is simply still being under somebody else's control because you are taking your cue from them. Standing in your sovereignty means that you choose when and how to act. You're not, your whole choice and actions are not coming from what somebody else is doing. So I do, you know, urge people to look at this. But, you know, in terms of opportunities, it can provide the opportunity for people to really make great strides in changing their life for the better. Like I said, transformation may be quite major on a personal level, major and very quick, because Mars is kind of a quickening agent. But a person can feel very courageous to do this. Sometimes it's very hard to make change in one's life, even if you know that you need to make those changes because you don't have the strength. You might not have physical strength. I think there will be a lot of vitality here, a lot of physical energy to do things and take bold action. Now, in terms of some of these challenging situations, like I said, Mars squaring Saturn, that can be feeling that you are thwarted by authority figures. And if you are able to see that what is true about that, and maybe it is true, and still be able to act accordingly, I mean, appropriately, then that can kind of overcome some of that. The problem is when people, like I said, they feel victimized, and yet they also are starting to wake up. They can do rash things because it's like they're so pent up, they just want to do something. And that's foolish. Or maybe they're young and they, you know, this is what is on their plate right now. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be in your early 20s and this is your reality right now. It's absolute insanity. And I'm in my 50s, and it's like, the Twilight Zone out there, in terms of what's happening to us. I never, ever have experienced anything even remotely like this. Anything. And I know there's something at play here. And I know it's going to be good, but it's very messy at the moment, isn't it? It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So if you are on the younger side, that can make you even more rash, because that's just how it works. People who are younger tend to be more emotional and reactive. And it's important to not allow yourself to be manipulated, because it can come from all angles. And you never know who is doing what and why. And not to, make everybody paranoid, but by the same token, I think that, lately I've been seeing things from some of the people that I follow, and I think to myself, I don't know if I agree with this. And I don't know why they're saying this right now. And they may be spiritual teachers that you follow. So you have to really kind of question everything, even the people that you tend to trust, because if they're starting to like kind of turn in a different direction, and you thought that they were one way and they start going a different way, it would be foolish just to follow them everywhere without questioning what they're saying. And yet it doesn't mean that you have to like be part of a riot or anything like that. Which with Mars square Saturn, that can feel justified to be part of some kind of a mass uprising that has violent overtones. Mars is opposing Uranus. Now, Uranus, like I said, is 12 degrees of Taurus, the exact same degree as the new moon. But, or did I say Mars? Uranus is 12 degrees. Mars is 3 degrees of Scorpio. So it's a pretty wide orb, but, according to astro.com, it's close enough to form an opposition. So with Mars opposing Uranus, that is, that's a revolution. But the thing is, we don't want to be rebels without a cause. Actually, the Sun and Moon are also opposing Uranus. So, and Saturn is squaring Uranus. So this idea of freedom, which Uranus represents, has a lot of hard angles from these personal planets. And, what that means is that this new moon may be the beginning of a major transformation in many people's lives for many different reasons, for personal reasons, that, it's not just one area of life that we're trying to transform. And so whatever it is for you, if you feel like there is an area, or maybe there are multiple areas of your life that you really want to transform, this is going to be a great time for it, because you're going to have a lot of courage to do it. And part of that courage is knowing that you need to do it. When people acknowledge that they're alcoholics, for instance, AA talks about, you have to confess, or whatever you want to call it, that you are an alcoholic. When you go to an AA meeting, you say, hi, I'm da-da-da, and I'm alcoholic. And that kind of thing takes courage. But the thing is that we have to understand that we are not, we can't identify with things that are like either a temporary state or, or actually anything is a temporary state. And the reason I say that is because, like, for instance, with the sun, forming a conjunction with Mars, but also squares with Saturn and oppositions with Uranus, there can be like a real rebellion against being, told that they have to do this or that, like, against authority figures, but also against what they thought that they had to be. And so this idea of like just kind of dropping out of society, which was part of what happened in the late 60s, when the hippie movement was happening, and which I associate a lot with Uranus itself. It was like a rejection of those, of conforming to those societal norms. And that included what somebody did for a living, or if they did anything for a living. Living in a commune and maybe just like chilling out and not necessarily doing much of anything on the material level. But the point I'm trying to make is that these transformations that are occurring at this new moon are very deep. They're not just like, oh, I'm going to quit my job. That can be a major change in one's life. But that is still like kind of on the surface, because if the person identifies with what they do, they're not really touching who they truly are at the core. And Scorpio is, again, what lies beneath. The eighth house is a house of transformation. We can call that the house of personal alchemy, or some people use words like magic. Magic doesn't mean pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It means co-creating with the universe and knowing that you are part of God, and so you possess the essence of what God does. Maybe not, you're not the God of, everything, but you're made up of what God is made up of. And so that is about sovereignty, about not waiting for somebody to tell you what to do, including a personal God. That you're taking the reins back, so to speak. And so, but there's hard angles. The hard angles can be very discouraging to people because they feel like they're being thwarted. I mean, that's the big thing. And when people stop being reactive and they simply observe it from a less emotional perspective, you can see that it's set up to create contrast so that we know exactly what we don't want. And that's how we're able to create this new golden age where we can have the kind of world that supports us, that doesn't try to keep us down. Because, in fact, even though it seems like there's so much authority being thrown around and that we're more at the mercy of authority figures than we ever been in recent history, the truth is that it's kind of a paradox, because the potential for freedom is like right here. It's like right at our fingertips. Yes, like I said, it's messy and we might have to go through a collective dark night of the soul. But when we come out the other end, it's going to be glorious. And the trick is, in the interim, to realize that any kind of sense of the outer entities thwarting you, keeping you from doing certain things that you want to do, allows you to find another way, whether it's to accomplish that same thing in a different way, or to simply look at what that thing is that you want to do and say, is this really important at this time? Because I can still find freedom within myself. I don't need to have an outer event occur for me to be free. And knowing too that the more that people are kept subjugated, the more the rockets of desire that Abraham Hicks talks about for freedom just get shot off more and more and more and more, so that there is this strong desire for total freedom, not even like partial freedom, because that's really what we've been living with, if you think about it. In probably just about every country in the world, is that we're given a certain illusion of freedom, but we really have been suffering with these limitations, and didn't fully understand it until now. The other thing too is that Uranus being in Taurus, and the fact that November ushers in eclipse season later in the month with a lunar eclipse in Taurus, although it's not aspecting Uranus at that time, it will form an exact conjunction in 2022 in November. So even this new moon, I'm tying to that. I mean, wow, exact conjunctions with the new moon and then the full moon, but they are solar and lunar eclipses. I'm sorry, this one isn't a solar eclipse, but they're occurring a year apart, and the next year and a half, Uranus is going to be in the same sign as the North Node. So hello. I'm talking about the transiting North Node in Taurus. So that is definitely about change, maybe rapid change, but destined to occur is the North Node and the eclipses. That's destiny calling. Wow. These things can come out of nowhere. It's like you have these systems in place, and then like overnight it just falls and it dissolves. I think about something like World War II, and when these places fell, and then all of a sudden it was over with. But obviously it doesn't mean that then everything just goes back to normal. There's there's fallout. It doesn't do it like that. But still, it's just this these things that can just happen, and then they just change, just occurs very, very rapidly. And we're like, wow, all of these things. So anyway, it's a very exciting time, even though it's quite unpredictable. I hope that you enjoyed this, you guys, and I am looking forward to this new moon in this period of time of what is going to occur. And I hope all of you have a great beginning of November. Bye.